The Great Indian Kitchen is a Malayalam language movie that portrays a social story. The entire story revolves around the lives of women. It beautifully depicts what happens when Indian women face issues like menstruation, how their lives become difficult, the various struggles they go through, and even how many of their dreams are stifled and crushed. This movie brings out these realities in an extraordinary way. So, let's dive into this incredible story. At the beginning of the story, we see a girl. She is the main protagonist, Anjali. She was learning dance at a theater group. She is a lively and cheerful girl, always smiling. The scene then cuts to Anjali's home. One day, a prospective groom's family comes to see her. The groom's name is Suraj, and he is a school teacher. After meeting Anjali, he likes her, and she also likes him. Gradually, a strong bond develops between the two families. A few days later, their wedding takes place. After the wedding, Anjali is welcomed into her new home with various traditional rituals. Within these customs, there is a subtle message hidden, which becomes clear as the story progresses. The next morning, Anjali enters the kitchen. Like every day, a girl comes to the kitchen to deliver milk. Slowly, Anjali forms a friendship with her. As Anjali was preparing tea, Suraj enters the kitchen. He hugs her from behind and tries to be romantic. They have a light-hearted conversation while drinking tea. After Suraj finishes his tea, Anjali immediately washes his cup. That night, one of Suraj's colleagues invites him for dinner. The couple goes there together, has dinner, and returns home late at night. After returning home, Anjali goes to the kitchen to help her mother-in-law. However, her mother-in-law tells her to rest, saying that she can manage the cooking alone. Anjali then goes to her room. A little later, her husband becomes romantic with her, while her mother-in-law is still in the kitchen, finishing all the household chores by herself. After completing all the work, she finally goes to bed. The next morning, while Anjali's father-in-law was reading the newspaper, her mother-in-law prepared his toothbrush by applying toothpaste to it. She had to do this every day. In other words, Anjali's father-in-law relied on his wife for all his personal needs. Later, Anjali joins her mother-in-law in the kitchen. Her mother-in-law does not use an electric mixer or blender. Instead, she grinds everything manually using a traditional grinding stone known as shilbata in India. Now, speaking of Suraj, he starts his morning with exercise. Meanwhile, during meal times, the women of the household prepare all the food. First, the men eat while the women serve them. After the meal, Anjali notices the dining table is left in a mess. Although only 2 people ate, it looks as if 4 people dined there. As Anjali was cleaning the dining table, her mother-in-law comes and starts eating from her father-in-law's plate. In this household, there is a rule that the wife must eat from the same plate her husband used. However, Anjali chooses to eat from a separate plate. A little later, Suraj's father comes outside and calls for his wife. Right then, his wife brings his shoes and puts them on his feet. After that, Suraj's sister calls their mother and says, "I'm in my 7th month now. Please come home soon." Anjali's mother-in-law replies, "I can't come right now. Your brother just got married and there's a lot of work to do at home." But her daughter doesn't listen and keeps insisting, saying, "You must come. If you don't, then who will take care of me?" She keeps requesting over and over again. Eventually, Anjali's mother-in-law agrees to go to her daughter's house. After packing everything, she leaves for her daughter's place. And this is where the real story begins. The next morning, Anjali serves tea to her father-in-law, whose name is Bhairav. Bhairav tells his daughter-in-law, "I haven't even washed my face yet. Your mother-in-law always used to apply toothpaste on my brush for me." Upon hearing this, Anjali takes his toothpaste toothbrush and applies toothpaste to it. After that, Anjali goes to the kitchen alone to prepare breakfast. Once the food is ready, she sets it on the table. She and her father-in-law have breakfast together. During the meal, Bhairav asks, "Did you grind the chutney by hand?" Anjali replies, "No, I used a mixer blender to make it." Bhairav responds, "That's fine, no problem. Don't ruin your hands by grinding it manually." In other words, he indirectly tells her that she did not do it the right way. After breakfast, Anjali once again notices that the dining table is in a terrible state. Since childhood, she has had an allergy to filth. She absolutely cannot stand unclean surroundings. Ever since she came to this house, she has only seen dirt and mess everywhere, so she has to clean everything properly. Later, Anjali starts preparing lunch. During lunchtime, Bhairav asks her, "Did you cook the rice in a pressure cooker?" Anjali replies, "Yes, I used the cooker." Bhairav then says, "Don't use the cooker anymore. We have a traditional stove in the house where your mother-in-law used to cook rice. It tastes much better when made there." After lunch, Bhairav calls his wife and tells her, "Tell Anjali to cook on the traditional stove." Anjali's mother-in-law then calls Anjali and gives her the same instructions. Anjali agrees to follow them. In the evening, Suraj comes home. At that moment, Anjali asks him, "What would you like for dinner?" Suraj replies, "We don't cook dinner in our house. We all eat roti at night. Can you make some rotis for us?" Anjali suggests, "There's still a little food left from lunch. Why don't you warm it up and eat that tonight?" Suraj dismisses the idea, saying, "So what if there's food left? Just throw it away and make some rotis for us." At night, Anjali prepares several rotis for them. After that, the two of them eat together. Once the meal is over, Anjali goes to the kitchen and finds it in a terrible state. She cleans up everything by herself. The director has beautifully depicted these scenes in the movie. Just as one task is completed, another one immediately appears. Anjali keeps working tirelessly, and by the time she finishes everything, she is completely exhausted. At this point, she needs someone to talk to share all the thoughts bottled up inside her. However, when Anjali finally gets some free time and goes to her room, her husband doesn't talk to her at all. Instead, he directly initiates an intimate relationship. This deeply hurts Anjali, and unfortunately, this is a daily reality for countless women in Indian households. The next morning, Anjali wakes up, takes a shower, and goes to the kitchen. Once again, the little girl arrives with milk. She hands the milk to Anjali and chats with her for a while before leaving. From then on, Anjali starts cooking on the traditional stove every day. One day, she notices that a pipe under the kitchen sink has developed a leak. Water is seeping out, causing a terrible smell throughout the kitchen. To manage the leak, Anjali places a small bucket under the pipe and cleans up the entire kitchen using an old cloth. Despite all this, she continues cooking. Meanwhile, she also washes the family's clothes in the washing machine. Just then, Bhairav tells her, "Don't wash my clothes in the machine. Using it will ruin them quickly." Hearing this, Anjali washes his clothes by hand. Evening arrives. When Suraj returns home, Anjali asks him about calling a plumber, but Suraj responds, "Oh, I completely forgot. Don't worry, I'll definitely send a plumber tomorrow." That night, Anjali once again goes to the kitchen. She sees that a huge pile of dishes has accumulated. One by one, she cleans everything. But due to the leaking pipe, the kitchen remains in a horrible state. One thing I noticed is that not a single man in the house ever enters the kitchen. No one even bothers to check what Anjali is doing in there. The only time Suraj came to the kitchen was right after their wedding. Since then, no one has ever stepped in. After finishing all her work, Anjali returns to her room. Once again, Suraj initiates an intimate relationship with her. But when we look at Anjali's face, we see that she is in deep distress. There is no trace of desire or emotional connection in her eyes. Instead, her mind is filled with the horrible, filthy, and suffocating experiences from the kitchen. Witnessing such unpleasant scenes every day has built up a completely different kind of emotion inside her. The next morning, Anjali tells Suraj that she has started her period. According to their family's customs, a woman on her period is considered impure. During this time, she is forbidden from cooking, leaving the house, or even staying in the same room as her husband. She is kept in a separate room, and everything, her food, her living space, is isolated from the rest of the family. Upon learning about Anjali's period, Suraj brings in another woman named Usha to take care of the household chores. While Usha works alone, Anjali steps out of her isolation to help her. She does this not just to assist with the work, but also to have someone to talk to. As they chat, Usha says, "I never follow these rules. Our ancestors never told us that a menstruating woman is impure. When I have my period, I simply keep it a secret from everyone." Eventually, Anjali's period ends. For 7 days, she had not entered the kitchen. But when she finally steps back in, she sees that the pipe is still leaking. Suraj has still not fixed it. Every day, Anjali continues to clean up the filthy, smelly water. Then she cooks and brings the food to the dining table. After that, she tells her husband, "I want to get a job." Both of them ask, "What kind of job will you do?" Anjali replies, "I want to be a dance teacher." But Bhairav disapproves of her decision. He says, "This is absolutely not acceptable in our family. The women of our house never work." Hearing this, Anjali feels very hurt. A little later, Suraj comforts her. He says, "Don't worry about this. We'll talk about it later. For now, just forget what father said." After that, Anjali calls her mother-in-law and tells her about wanting a job. Her mother-in-law says, "All right, apply for the job, but don't tell anyone about this for now." A few days later, Anjali and Suraj go out for a meal. While eating, Anjali tells Suraj, "You know the outside rules properly. I mean, you put all the meat bones on one plate. The dining table is completely clean." Hearing this, Suraj gets a little angry. He says, "Do you not like the way I eat at home? This is my house, my rules. Everything happens as I wish. What's your problem with that?" He continues scolding Anjali. Until they reach home, he does not speak to her again. Anjali feels very sad. After returning home, Anjali asks Suraj, "What did I say that made you stop talking to me? Are you angry with me?" Suraj replies, "What you said was enough to make me angry. If you had just said sorry at that moment, I wouldn't have been mad at you." He indirectly hints that she should apologize. Anjali thinks about it for a long time. Should she say sorry? After much thought, she decides to apologize. Finally, she says sorry, and as soon as she does, she sees a smile on Suraj's face. After that, he starts talking to her with love again and calls her closer. At that moment, a sweet smile appears on Anjali's face as well. The next morning, when Suraj is about to leave for school, Anjali calls him and says, "Please call the plumber and bring him home today. The condition of the kitchen is really bad." Suraj replies, "I know you can't tolerate bad smells at all. All right, I will definitely call the plumber." Saying this, he leaves. After Suraj leaves, Anjali applies for the job without telling anyone. Night falls. 2 of Suraj's relatives come to his house. Everyone is chatting when one of the guests tells Anjali, "Go and bring me a cup of black tea right now." Anjali prepares the tea in her usual way and gives it to the man. Seeing this, he gets a little angry and says, "What is this that you've made? Do you call this black tea?" He then laughs and begins explaining to Anjali how to properly make black tea. After that, he says, "Today is a holiday for the women, so the women will sit and rest, while we men will do the cooking in the kitchen." Saying this, all the men go into the kitchen and cook together. After the meal, when the guests are resting, Anjali goes into the kitchen and sees that the place is an absolute mess. Dirty dishes and spills everywhere. Seeing this, Anjali gets extremely angry and doesn't know what to do. Just then, the same man calls out, "Bring me some color tea." Anjali's anger flares up even more. Frustrated, she makes him a cup of tea. Morning arrives. Bhairav brings a letter for Anjali. Handing it to her, he asks, "What is this letter about?" Anjali opens the envelope and reads it. It is an interview call letter. She tells Bhairav about it. Bhairav responds, "I already told you not to get a job. We had discussed this once. Then why did you still apply? Look at your mother-in-law. She completed her graduation, and my father once told her not to take a job. Since then, she has never even mentioned the idea of working. Women look better when they stay at home. You should just take care of household chores properly." Night falls again. When Suraj comes to Anjali, he starts scolding her once more. "I told you so many times not to apply for a job. Then why did you do it, ignoring my words? Before marriage, I made it clear to your family that no women in our house will work." But Anjali protests, saying, "No one ever told me that." Scene change one day. Anjali and Suraj were getting ready to sleep. At that moment, Suraj told Anjali, "In a few days, I will wear a mala, a sacred garland. This is part of an Indian tradition, and after wearing it, a couple cannot engage in physical intimacy for several days." After saying this, Suraj gestures towards Anjali, indicating his desire for intimacy. Anjali then requests to talk about something. She says, "Before we get intimate, can we engage in foreplay? Because I experience a lot of pain during intimacy." She then explains the concept in simple terms. Foreplay means caressing and stimulating your partner before intimacy to enhance arousal. It helps in natural lubrication, which reduces discomfort and pain. Hearing this, Suraj gets very angry. He takes it the wrong way and says, "You seem to know everything about this. You must have done it before, with someone else." Then he adds, "Looking at you, I don't even feel like doing foreplay." Hearing this, Anjali feels deeply hurt, and tears roll down her cheeks. A few days later, Suraj and Bhairav wear the sacred garland, mala. According to tradition, after wearing it, a husband and wife cannot stay in the same room, spend romantic time together, or speak to each other except when necessary. They must follow these strict rules. While having breakfast, Suraj asks Anjali, "Is this food from yesterday?" Anjali replies, "Yes, it's from yesterday." Hearing this, Bhairav gets angry and leaves. Suraj then scolds Anjali, saying, "People who wear the mala cannot eat leftover food. They must always be given freshly cooked meals." Anjali genuinely did not know about this rule because her father worked in another city. Suraj, frustrated, also gets upset and leaves for work. Later, Anjali's menstrual cycle starts again. At that time, Bhairav brings his sister to help with household work. As soon as she arrives, she starts scolding Anjali. She says, "A woman who is on her period should never sit on the bed. She must stay on the ground while doing all her chores." Vasudha then spreads a mat on the floor and orders Anjali to sit there, saying that she must complete all her tasks from that position. Later, Vasudha brings food for Anjali. After eating, she tells Anjali to leave the plate there and not leave the room at all. Meanwhile, there's a statement on TV from Kerala regarding women on their period. It says that women who are on their period should not be called impure, but these women cannot go to the temple for 7 days. However, they are still expected to do all the household work. Some people like this statement, while others completely disagree. Those who disagree protest against it. During this time, Vasudha repeatedly goes to Anjali and finds something to scold her about. She keeps reprimanding Anjali. One day, Suraj is riding his bike to school when he suddenly has an accident and falls to the ground. Anjali, seeing this from a distance, rushes over to him. She tries to lift him up by holding his hand, but Suraj repeatedly ignores her and asks her not to touch him. Then he says to her, "In this condition, you touched your husband? Are you really foolish, or do you know nothing?" He keeps scolding her. Anjali, overwhelmed by all these rules, feels completely lost. She doesn't know what to do. Angry, she walks away. Later, Suraj calls his guru. And asks, "What happens if a woman touches her husband while on her period? What is the way to purify myself from this?" The guru replies, "There are 3 ways to purify yourself. 1. You must eat cow dung once. 2. Drink cow urine once. 3. 3. You must bathe in a river. Suraj then goes to the river to purify himself. He bathes in the river and becomes pure. Meanwhile, Anjali sees a post. Anjali sees a post on Facebook from a girl who accepts the statement from the court. The girl writes on Facebook saying that every woman should have freedom in her life and that women are not slaves to any man. Women should be free to go wherever they want. Anjali really likes the post. She shares the video, and that same night, several relatives come to Suraj's house. They tell him, "Tell your wife to delete the video from Facebook right now. Don't we have any honor in this society? It is women like her that are gradually changing the respect and traditions of society." Suraj then goes to Anjali and tries to convince her, "The video you shared, delete it now." Anjali replies, "You can do whatever you want. I'm keeping the video there. You can't do anything to me because you are wearing the mala now. Will you touch me? Fine, come inside. I did what I thought was right." The scene changes. One day, Guruji comes to Suraj's house to perform a puja. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the girl comes to give milk to Anjali. At that time, Anjali tells the girl to lock the door from the outside. Anjali then stares ahead, deep in thought. At that very moment, Suraj tells her to make tea. Upon hearing this, Anjali becomes very angry. She starts thinking about how she will take her revenge, how she will teach them a lesson. These people don't value women at all. They don't give women even a penny's worth. She was thinking about countless such things. After a while, Suraj comes back to the kitchen and tells Anjali, "You haven't made tea yet." Anjali replies, "Yes, I'll make it right now." Saying this, she continues thinking. Then, she gets up to make the tea. She uses the dirty water from the pipe that drains from the kitchen to make 2 cups of tea. After that, she brings them the tea and waits in the kitchen for a while. Then, Suraj comes to the kitchen, quite angry. When Suraj raises his hand to strike Anjali, she pours the foul-smelling water from the kitchen onto them. Afterward, she locks the door, packs all her belongings, and leaves the house completely. She then returns home. Upon returning home, Anjali's mother tries to explain to her, "You didn't do the right thing. Coming here was not right at all. Now come, I'll take you back. You should apologize to them." At that moment, Anjali's younger brother comes and asks for water from another of Anjali's sisters. Hearing this, Anjali becomes furious. She angrily tells her brother, "Can't you bring water with your own hands? Why should all this be done by girls?" She vents her anger on her brother in this way, and the scene cuts here. After that, a few months later, the next scene is shown. Now, Anjali has a car. She has fulfilled her dreams and is now living a much better life. Meanwhile, we see Suraj. Suraj has remarried again. The very next day after the wedding, Suraj comes into the kitchen and drinks tea made by his wife. Then he talks to her romantically. After finishing the tea, his wife immediately washes the cup, and this means that this girl's life will turn out to be like Anjali's. The rest of her life will be spent working in the kitchen. And right here, the story ends. Truly, the story's plot is exceptionally beautiful. Even today, this continues to happen in the lives of Indian and Bangladeshi girls, where girls silently endure their husbands' injustices and abuse just to save the marriage. In this way, a girl can never live a beautiful life. Therefore, to live, one should live life on their own terms. Please let me know how you felt about this story, and also let me know which country you are watching me from by commenting. I'll talk to you in the next video. Until then, stay well, stay healthy, and goodbye.